Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next part of this emotional story. The rain fell softly that evening, tapping against the cracked window like a quiet warning. Inside the small, dimly lit apartment, 18-year-old Ariana Miller sat on the edge of her bed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her world had always been dark, she had been blind since childhood, but tonight, the darkness felt heavier than ever. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the silence, in the way her mother's footsteps paced back and forth across the worn wooden floor. Ariana tilted her head slightly. "Mom," she asked gently, "why are you so restless?" Her mother, Linda Miller, stopped pacing. Her breath trembled. For years, Linda had struggled, medical bills, rent, debts she could never escape. Life had cornered her, and now she stood at the edge of a decision that would haunt her forever. "Ariana," Linda said slowly, forcing calm into her voice, "I found someone who wants to help us." Ariana smiled faintly. "That's good, right?" Linda's hands clenched into fists. "He's very wealthy. A businessman." Ariana nodded, trusting. She had always trusted her mother. She had no reason not to. "Will he help you with the debts?" "Yes," Linda whispered. "He'll clear everything." A pause followed. Too long. "And what does he want in return?" Ariana asked quietly. Linda swallowed hard. "Marriage." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Ariana's smile faded. Her fingers tightened around the fabric of her dress. "Marriage? To who?" "To you," Linda replied. The room felt like it was closing in, even though Ariana couldn't see it. Her chest tightened, her heartbeat racing. "You mean, I would marry a stranger?" "He's not just a stranger," Linda said quickly, almost desperately. "He's a billionaire. Powerful. Influential. He can give you a life I never could." Ariana stood up slowly, her hands shaking as she reached for the wall to steady herself. "Mom, I'm blind. I don't even know what he looks like. What kind of man would want to marry someone he's never met?" Linda turned away, tears sliding down her cheeks. A cold one. That night, Ariana cried silently, curled up in bed, clutching the thin blanket like it was the only thing holding her together. She wanted to scream, to beg, to run, but where could a blind girl go in a world that already ignored her? 3 days later, Ariana was dressed in a simple white gown. Not a wedding dress, just something clean and modest. The car that arrived outside their apartment was expensive, judging by the sound of its engine and the way the door closed with a solid, confident thud. A man stepped out. His shoes echoed against the pavement as he walked toward the door. "This is it," Linda whispered, holding Ariana's hands one last time. "I'm sorry." Before Ariana could respond, strong hands gently but firmly guided her forward. She felt the cool air, then the leather seat beneath her. The car door shut. And just like that, her old life disappeared. The drive was long. Ariana listened to the city fade away, replaced by silence and smooth roads. When the car finally stopped, she sensed space, open, vast, intimidating. She was helped out and guided inside. The air smelled expensive, clean, unfamiliar. "You may leave," a deep male voice said calmly. That voice, cold, controlled, emotionless, sent a chill through Ariana's spine. Footsteps retreated. A door closed. Ariana stood alone. "My name is Victor Blackwood," the man said. "You are my wife now." She turned toward his voice, her chin lifted in quiet courage. "I didn't choose this." "Neither did I," Victor replied flatly. "This is a contract. Nothing more." Ariana's heart ached. "Then why marry me?" There was a brief silence before he answered. "Because you were offered. And I needed a wife." No warmth. No apology. That evening, the wedding ceremony was short, private, and emotionless. Ariana couldn't see the luxury around her, the crystal lights, the marble floors, but she felt how small she was in that massive mansion. How powerless. When the vows ended, Victor leaned closer and whispered, "You will have everything you need here. Comfort. Security. But don't expect love." Ariana nodded slowly. "I never expected it." Later that night, a maid guided her into a bedroom larger than her entire apartment back home. The bed was soft. The silence was loud. Victor entered minutes later. She sensed him near, standing, watching, studying her like a puzzle. "You can sleep," he said. "Nothing will happen tonight." Relief washed over her, mixed with confusion. Why? Because I'm not a monster, he replied. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. But remember this, Ariana. In this house, weakness is dangerous. Learn to survive. The door closed. Ariana lay awake long after, staring into the darkness she had always known, but tonight, it felt different. This darkness held secrets, power, fear, and somewhere deep inside her fragile heart, a quiet thought echoed. This marriage would either destroy her, or change everything. Morning arrived quietly in the Blackwood mansion, though Ariana could not see the sunlight spilling through the tall windows. She felt it instead, the warmth brushing against her face, unfamiliar and almost gentle. The bed beneath her was far softer than anything she had ever known, yet her body was tense, her mind restless. This place did not feel safe. It felt controlled. Every sound echoed differently here, amplified by space and wealth, reminding her that she no longer belonged to the small, noisy world she once knew. A soft knock came at the door. Before Ariana could respond, it opened, and a woman's calm voice spoke. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood. I'm Evelyn, the head housekeeper. I'm here to assist you." Mrs. Blackwood. The title felt heavy, unreal. Ariana sat up slowly. "Good morning," she replied politely, masking her unease. She had learned long ago that politeness was her shield. Evelyn helped her get dressed, describing each outfit carefully, as if trying to give Ariana a picture with words. The clothes were expensive, perfectly tailored, yet Ariana felt like an imposter wearing them. As Evelyn guided her through the mansion for breakfast, Ariana counted her steps, memorizing the layout in her mind. Blindness had taught her survival through awareness. Every hallway, every turn, every sound mattered. The dining room was vast. Ariana sensed the presence of Victor before he spoke, his stillness, his authority, his silence. He sat at the head of the table, already working on something, papers shifting beneath his hands. "Sit," he said calmly. She did. Plates were placed in front of her, the smell of fresh food filling the air. She realized how hungry she was, yet she hesitated, unsure of what was expected. "You don't need permission to eat," Victor said, his tone sharp but not cruel. "This is your house now." The words sounded hollow. Ariana picked up her fork carefully. "Thank you." They ate in silence, broken only by the faint clink of silverware. Ariana could feel his attention on her, not warm, not curious, but observant, like he was assessing risk. She wondered what kind of life had shaped a man into someone so distant. After breakfast, Victor stood. "Evelyn will show you the house. You are free to move where you like, except my office." Ariana nodded. "I understand." Before he could leave, she spoke again. "Mr. Blackwood, Victor." He paused. "I know this marriage is a contract to you," she said softly. "But I want you to know, I don't intend to be a burden." For a brief moment, something shifted in the air. Victor didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was controlled. "See that you aren't." With that, he left. The days that followed were quiet, almost painfully so. Ariana explored the mansion with careful steps, learning its rhythm. She discovered the garden by sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant splash of a fountain, the soft whisper of wind through trees. It became her refuge. There, she felt less like a possession and more like a person. But the staff treated her differently. Too gentle, too cautious. She overheard whispers when they thought she couldn't hear. Words like, sold, pitiful, and temporary, floated through the halls like shadows. Ariana pretended not to notice, but each word carved into her heart. Victor remained distant. He came home late, left early, and spoke to her only when necessary. Yet, there were moments, small, unexpected moments, that confused her. Once, when she tripped on the stairs, he caught her before she fell. His grip was firm, steady. "You should be more careful," he said. "Thank you," she replied. He released her quickly, as if contact itself was dangerous. Another night, she heard him pacing outside her bedroom door, stopping, then walking away. She lay awake, wondering why a man so cold seemed unable to fully ignore her. One afternoon, a woman arrived at the mansion. Ariana heard heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, confident and familiar. The woman's voice was smooth, almost mocking. So this is her. Victor didn't deny it. Blind, fragile, the woman continued. Is this really your wife, Victor? Ariana stood frozen near the doorway, unseen but not unheard. Leave, Cassandra, Victor said coldly. Cassandra laughed softly. You've changed. No, Victor replied. I've made a decision. The door slammed. Silence returned, thicker than before. That night, Ariana sat alone in her room, emotions tangled. She had been sold, trapped in a marriage without love, surrounded by wealth she could not see and power she could not touch. Yet, beneath the fear, something else stirred, determination. She thought of her mother, of betrayal and desperation. She thought of Victor, a man wrapped in ice, hiding something darker beneath. And she thought of herself, not weak, not useless, not invisible. She whispered into the darkness, her voice steady. I will survive this. Down the hall, Victor stood still, having overheard her words through the slightly open door. For the first time since the marriage, doubt crept into his certainty. Because the blind girl he thought he had bought was far stronger than he expected. Life inside the Blackwood mansion slowly settled into a routine, but beneath that routine, tension quietly grew. Ariana woke early each morning, guided by habit rather than sight, and spent hours in the garden where the world felt less sharp. The staff had begun to realize she was not as fragile as they assumed. She memorized voices, footsteps, moods. She listened more than she spoke, and in that silence, she learned. The mansion was not just a home, it was a battlefield of power, secrets, and unspoken rules, and Ariana was determined not to be crushed by it. Victor, on the other hand, found his control slipping in ways he did not expect. He had married Ariana for convenience, a solution to a problem he never spoke about, and he believed emotional distance would keep everything clean and simple. Yet her presence unsettled him. She did not demand attention, luxury, or affection. She moved through his world quietly, with dignity, and that disturbed him more than resistance ever could. At night, when the mansion grew silent, he found himself listening for her footsteps, her voice, any sign of her existence, and he hated himself for it. One evening, Victor returned home earlier than usual. Ariana was in the library, her fingers brushing over the spines of books she could not read but liked to touch, as if they connected her to stories she imagined in her mind. She sensed him before he spoke. You're home early, she said calmly. Victor stopped, surprised. How did you know? She smiled faintly. Your steps are heavier when you're tired. He said nothing, watching her from across the room, noticing how composed she looked, how she carried herself without fear. You should not be alone in here, he said. You could get hurt. Ariana turned toward him. I've been blind my whole life, Victor. I know how to move in the dark. The words struck something deep inside him. For a brief second, he saw not weakness, but strength forged by hardship. That night, a storm rolled in, loud and violent. Thunder cracked through the sky, shaking the mansion. Ariana sat on her bed, her breathing uneven. Storms had always frightened her. The sudden noise, the loss of control, the memories of hospitals and helplessness flooded back. She tried to calm herself, but when lightning struck close, she flinched, her hands trembling. Without realizing it, she whispered his name. Moments later, the door opened. Victor stood there, tense. Are you all right? He asked stiffly. Ariana hesitated, pride battling fear. I don't like storms, she admitted quietly. Victor sighed, then stepped inside, sitting on a chair near her bed, far enough to keep distance, close enough to offer presence. He said nothing, but he stayed. When the storm finally passed, Ariana had fallen asleep. Victor watched her for a moment longer than necessary before leaving, confused by the unfamiliar ache in his chest. The next day, Cassandra returned. This time, Ariana heard her before she saw her presence announced by the tension in the air. Cassandra's voice was sharp, irritated. You're hiding behind a blind girl now, she said openly. Ariana sat nearby, pretending not to listen, though every word landed like a blade. This has nothing to do with you, Victor replied coldly. Cassandra laughed. Everything about you has something to do with me. Or did you forget why you needed a wife so quickly? Victor's silence spoke volumes. Ariana's heart pounded. She didn't understand the full meaning, but she understood one thing clearly: she was part of something far bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. Later that evening, Ariana confronted Victor for the first time. Her voice was calm, but firm. "I know I was brought here as part of an arrangement," she said. "But I need to know what kind of danger I'm in." Victor looked at her sharply. "You are not in danger," he said. "Not from me." Ariana didn't back down. "Then from who?" For a long moment, Victor said nothing. Finally, he spoke, his tone low. "My world is not kind. There are people who would use you to hurt me." Ariana nodded slowly. "Then teach me how to survive in it." The request stunned him. He had expected fear, maybe tears. Not resolve. From that day on, something shifted between them. Victor began involving Ariana in small decisions, explaining things, guiding her through social expectations. He arranged for a specialist to help her adapt to the mansion independently, not out of obligation, but necessity, or so he told himself. Ariana absorbed everything quickly. She learned how to read people by tone, how to recognize lies by hesitation. The staff began to respect her, not out of pity, but because of the quiet authority she developed. Yet, danger crept closer. Victor received threats, subtle but clear. His enemies had noticed Ariana. One message ended with a chilling line: "Your weakness now has a name." Victor destroyed the message, but the fear stayed. That night, he stood outside Ariana's room again, torn between protecting distance and protecting her. Inside, Ariana sat on her bed, unaware of the exact threat, but fully aware that her life had changed forever. She whispered to herself, steady and determined, "I will not be the weakness they think I am." And for the first time, Victor believed her. The first real threat came quietly, wrapped in politeness and false smiles. A formal dinner was announced, one Victor could not avoid: business partners, investors, and a few powerful figures whose names carried weight in places Ariana had never seen. When Victor told her about it, his voice was firm but cautious. "You will attend," he said. "But you will stay close to me at all times." Ariana nodded, sensing the tension beneath his calm. She did not ask questions. She had learned that in Victor's world, information came only when he decided it was safe. On the evening of the dinner, Ariana wore an elegant gown chosen carefully for her comfort. Evelyn described every detail, and Ariana committed it to memory, imagining herself not as a blind girl being displayed, but as a woman standing on equal ground. As Victor offered his arm, she felt the strength beneath his suit, the controlled power he carried. "If anything feels wrong," he murmured, "tell me immediately." She leaned closer and whispered back, "I trust my instincts more than my eyes." For a brief moment, his grip tightened, not in warning, but in reassurance. The dinner hall was alive with voices, laughter, and hidden intentions. Ariana listened carefully, piecing together conversations like a puzzle. She noticed how some voices softened when they spoke to Victor, while others carried an edge of challenge. Then she heard one voice that made her chest tighten, smooth, calculating, and unfamiliar. "So this is your wife," the man said, stepping closer. "I'm Julian Cross." Victor's response was cold. "Keep your distance." Ariana smiled politely, extending her hand. Julian took it a little too long, his thumb brushing her skin in a way that made her uncomfortable. "She's beautiful," he said lightly. "Delicate." Ariana withdrew her hand gently. "I am stronger than I sound," she replied calmly. The silence that followed was sharp. Victor's respect for her deepened in that instant. As the night progressed, Ariana sensed eyes on her, studying, measuring. She felt like a piece on a chessboard, and the realization terrified her. Suddenly, her head spun slightly, her balance shifting. She gripped Victor's arm. "Victor," she whispered, "something's wrong." He reacted instantly, supporting her weight. His voice turned. "Dangerous. What did you drink?" Before she could answer, her knees buckled. Victor lifted her without hesitation, his jaw clenched. "Clear the room," he ordered. Later, in the quiet of the mansion, a doctor confirmed Victor's fear. Ariana had been drugged, just enough to disorient her, not enough to cause lasting harm. Victor stood beside her bed, fists clenched, fury burning beneath his composed exterior. "They used you to send a message," he said. Ariana swallowed, her throat dry. I told you I wouldn't be your weakness, she whispered. Victor looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression cracked. And you're not, he said quietly. That's what terrifies them. The next days were tense. Security was increased. Victor cancelled meetings, moved operations, and kept Ariana close. She noticed the shift in him, less distant, more protective. One night, unable to sleep, she asked the question that had haunted her since Cassandra's visit. Why did you need a wife so suddenly? Victor was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Because someone was trying to destroy me. A marriage made me appear stable, untouchable. It closed certain doors. Ariana nodded slowly. And I was convenient. Victor didn't deny it. At first. The honesty hurt, but she respected it. Danger returned in another form. Ariana received a phone call while Victor was away. The voice was distorted but clear in its threat. You don't belong in his world, the caller said. Leave, or you'll pay. Ariana's hands trembled, but her voice did not. If you think fear will control me, she replied, you don't know me. She ended the call and sat still, breathing through the fear. When Victor returned and learned what happened, his anger was explosive. They crossed a line, he said. And they will regret it. But Ariana surprised him. Running won't protect us, she said. Facing them will. Victor stared at her, realizing that the girl he had married out of necessity was now standing beside him as an equal. You're asking to walk into danger, he said. Ariana nodded. I've lived with danger my whole life. This time, I won't be blind to it. That night, Victor arranged for Ariana to learn self-defense adapted to her blindness, and to understand the political landscape surrounding him. She trained, learned, and adapted, pushing herself beyond every limit others assumed she had. The staff no longer whispered. They watched with respect. But while Ariana grew stronger, the enemy grew bolder. Julian Cross watched from the shadows, his plans tightening. He smiled to himself, believing he knew exactly how to break Victor Blackwood. He was wrong, because Ariana was no longer just a wife bought by a contract. She was becoming the one thing Victor's enemies never expected, a strength they could not see coming. The mansion had grown tense with a quiet electricity, the kind that signaled storms both inside and out. Ariana moved through the rooms with the ease of someone who had mastered her environment. Blindness, once considered her weakness, had become her advantage. She could detect the slightest movement, hear footsteps across marble, recognize voices from the softest whisper. Every corner of the mansion was mapped in her mind, every sound catalogued, and every possibility anticipated. Victor noticed this transformation, though he rarely admitted it aloud. The woman he had purchased out of necessity was no longer dependent. She was alert, intelligent, and cunning. One morning, Ariana awoke to the sound of a soft knock at her door. It was Evelyn, the head housekeeper. Ariana, someone is here to see you, she said. Ariana's senses sharpened. Visitors were rare, and in Victor's world, even rarer for her. Who is it? She asked. Evelyn hesitated. A friend of Victor's. He insisted you meet her. Ariana nodded, trusting Evelyn's judgment. Soon, the presence of another woman entered the room. Ariana felt it immediately, confident, strong, and purposeful. The voice spoke, smooth but firm. Ariana, I'm Helena. I'm someone who can help you. Ariana's brow furrowed. Help me. How? Helena smiled faintly. You are in danger. Not from Victor, he protects you, in his own way, but from others who would see him hurt. You are his weakness, and I've been sent to teach you to become a weapon instead. Ariana's mind raced. Danger, training, allies she had never imagined. Her life was no longer what it had been, and yet a small thrill surged through her. I'm listening, she said. And so it began. Helena was strict. She taught Ariana to move through spaces not only with awareness but with strategic thinking. She trained her in self-defense tailored to someone without sight, teaching Ariana to use sound, touch, and intuition as weapons. Each session left Ariana exhausted but exhilarated. She learned to anticipate attacks, recognize subtle threats, and use her environment to her advantage. It was a dangerous dance, but one she embraced fully. Victor watched from a distance, observing her transformation with a mix of awe and something unspoken. He had never expected a blind girl to adapt so quickly, or to grow into someone so formidable. Meanwhile, Julian Cross's maneuvers grew bolder. He began sending messages, subtle threats, and veiled intimidation. Each attempt to frighten Ariana was met with calm resolve, a sharp retort, or a clever evasion. Word spread quietly through Victor's network. The wife he had acquired was no longer helpless. She was clever, aware, and growing stronger every day. The whispers in the mansion shifted from doubt to admiration. One evening, during a particularly harsh thunderstorm, a more direct challenge arrived. A masked intruder managed to slip past the mansion's defenses. Ariana, alone in the library, sensed the intruder before any sound reached her. Her training with Helena had taught her to detect changes in air pressure, floor vibrations, and faint odors. Using a nearby cane she had begun carrying, she tapped rhythmically across the floor, each movement precise. The intruder froze. Ariana's voice rang out, calm and commanding. "I know you're there. Leave now, or you won't leave at all." The intruder hesitated, then lunged. Ariana sidestepped instinctively, her cane finding its mark, striking with calculated force. When Victor arrived moments later, alerted by the staff, he found Ariana standing, breathing hard but uninjured, the intruder unconscious at her feet. Victor's usual stoicism cracked for a brief moment. "You did this?" he asked, incredulous. Ariana nodded. "I am not your weakness," she said firmly. "And I won't be anyone else's either." For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar, a mixture of pride and fear. Pride in her strength, and fear for what could happen if the enemies realized they underestimated her. In the days that followed, Victor began sharing more with Ariana. He explained the delicate web of his business empire, the alliances, the enemies, and the subtle threats that surrounded him. He revealed the names of those plotting against him, their motivations, and their weaknesses. Ariana absorbed it all, her mind a steel trap, analyzing, memorizing, and strategizing. Her blindness no longer mattered. In some ways, it gave her an advantage. She could focus on sound, patterns, and behavior without distraction. Victor realized she was learning faster than anyone he had ever trained. But not all was strategy and danger. Moments of unexpected tenderness began to slip through the cracks of their professional interactions. Victor found himself lingering near Ariana, listening to her laughter, catching her voice as she described her observations, or noting the cleverness in her retorts. Ariana, too, began noticing subtle changes in Victor, the way he allowed her presence to linger, the rare softness in his tone, the almost imperceptible concern when she pushed herself too hard. Neither of them admitted these feelings, not aloud, but they existed, quietly, like coals burning under ash. Then came the night that changed everything. Victor called Ariana to the study, unusually tense. "Julian Cross has moved," he said quietly. "He has resources in the city and he's targeting anyone close to me. That includes you." Ariana remained calm. "Then we go to him first," she replied. Her confidence had become a shield and a sword. Victor studied her for a long moment, realizing that she was no longer the girl he had married out of necessity. She was now a partner, intelligent, brave, and unafraid. Together, they planned. With Helena's guidance, Ariana would confront the threats in a controlled environment, learning to navigate danger and use her instincts to survive. Victor remained close, protective yet allowing her independence, a delicate balance of trust and control. The mansion buzzed with preparation, each staff member aware that something significant was coming. Ariana felt it too. Danger was near, but so was opportunity, an opportunity to prove herself not just as Victor's wife, but as someone capable of facing the world on her own terms. That night, as she lay in bed, Ariana reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of her mother, of betrayal and survival, of darkness and fear. She thought of Victor, a man she had once thought distant and cold, now a complicated mixture of protector, mentor, and perhaps something more. She whispered into the darkness, a promise to herself: "I will not be broken. I will not be silenced. And I will not be anyone's weakness." Outside, the city slept, unaware of the storm of determination, courage, and strategy brewing in the mansion. Ariana had changed. Victor had changed. And soon, their enemies would learn that the blind girl they had underestimated was far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The tension in the Blackwood mansion had reached a boiling point. Ariana moved through the hallways with a confidence that bordered on fearless, her heightened senses allowing her to detect the slightest anomaly in her surroundings. Every step, every breath, was calculated. Victor, while impressed, remained silently vigilant. He had watched her grow from the fragile girl he had married into a woman capable of holding her own in a world filled with predators disguised as allies. And yet, despite her strength, he could not shake a sense of unease. Danger had a way of finding them, no matter how prepared they were. It began with a subtle shift, a whisper in the wind, a shadow that lingered too long, a message slipped under the door. Ariana discovered it first, a folded note with no signature. She unfolded it carefully, fingers tracing the edges. The words were chilling in their simplicity: "Tonight, your world will burn." Her pulse quickened, but her voice remained calm when she read it aloud to Victor. "It's a threat," she said, her tone steady. "They know I'm here." Victor's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. "So they've decided to act sooner than I expected," he said. "They underestimate you, and that's their first mistake." The staff was on high alert. Helena trained Ariana relentlessly throughout the day, simulating ambushes and attacks, each scenario pushing her senses to their limits. Ariana adapted quickly, moving through obstacles with precision, predicting movements before they occurred, and striking with controlled force. Victor observed from the shadows, a mixture of admiration and anxiety etched into his features. He had never anticipated a situation where his wife, someone he had married out of convenience, would become a critical line of defense for his life and empire. As night fell, the mansion's atmosphere thickened. The wind howled outside, rattling windows and doors. Ariana sat in the main hall, listening intently. Every creak, every shuffle, every whispered movement was catalogued in her mind. Victor approached silently, standing just behind her. "You were ready for this," he said, his tone low but firm. "But remember, not everyone in this house is on our side. Trust your instincts." Ariana nodded. "I trust them more than I trust the darkness," she replied, a faint smile touching her lips. Victor allowed himself a brief glance at her, surprised by the unwavering courage in her voice. Then it happened. The lights flickered and died, plunging the mansion into darkness. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows. Ariana remained calm, relying on her heightened senses. She could hear multiple sets of footsteps approaching, fast, deliberate, trained. The intruders had come prepared, confident that the darkness would give them the advantage. They were wrong. Ariana moved like a shadow herself, guided by sound, instinct, and the memory of the mansion's layout. She intercepted the first attacker, using his momentum against him, spinning him into a wall with a thud. Another lunged from behind, but she anticipated it, sidestepping and striking his shoulder with precise force. Every movement was calculated, every reaction premeditated. Victor joined the fray moments later, his presence commanding and terrifying. He moved with lethal precision, disarming and incapacitating intruders without hesitation. Ariana followed his lead, a seamless extension of his defensive strategies. Together, they were a storm within the storm, unpredictable and unstoppable. The staff, alerted by the commotion, moved strategically to support them, sealing exits and subduing those who had underestimated the mansion's inhabitants. After what felt like an eternity, silence fell. The intruders lay unconscious or fled into the night, leaving behind the remnants of chaos. Ariana leaned against a pillar, breathing heavily but steady. Victor approached, his eyes scanning her face. "You did well," he said, his voice unusually soft. "Better than I could have imagined." Ariana looked up at him, her own heart still racing. "We did well," she corrected, a subtle shift in ownership of the moment. Victor's expression softened briefly, a flicker of pride and something unspoken passing between them. In the aftermath, Victor made several difficult decisions. Security was tightened, new protocols implemented, and alliances reinforced. He revealed more of his world to Ariana, including secrets that even she had not anticipated. He explained the intricate web of power and betrayal surrounding him, the enemies who lurked just beyond sight, and the strategies required to survive. Ariana absorbed every word, her mind sharp and unyielding. The mansion, once a place of fear and confinement, had become a fortress, and she was its guardian as much as he was. But the night's events had also revealed a vulnerability neither could ignore. Julian Cross was not acting alone, his influence and reach were broader than they had imagined. Victor knew that this confrontation was only the beginning. Ariana, too, understood the stakes. She could feel it in every nerve, every instinct. The enemies would return, smarter, more prepared, and more dangerous. But she was ready. And for the first time, Victor realized that her readiness was not just for survival, it was for dominance. As dawn approached, the storm outside subsided, leaving the mansion drenched but standing firm. Ariana sat by the window, listening to the rain's retreat, her mind already analyzing the next steps. Victor joined her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You've changed everything," he said quietly. Ariana turned her head, meeting his gaze. "No," she replied. "We've changed everything." The partnership between them had evolved, forged in fire and tested by danger. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had grown into something neither had expected, a bond built on trust, strength, and mutual respect. That morning, as sunlight pierced through the clouds, Ariana felt a sense of clarity she had never known. She was no longer just a blind girl sold into marriage, she was a force to be reckoned with. Her instincts were honed, her courage unshakable, and her resolve unbreakable. Victor had seen it too, though he struggled to admit the truth aloud. Together, they were no longer merely surviving, they were taking control. The enemies who had thought to manipulate or harm them had underestimated the storm that had been quietly growing within the walls of the Blackwood mansion. And now, the storm was ready to strike back. The days following the storm were a tense blend of vigilance and preparation. Ariana moved with a quiet confidence, her senses sharpened and her instincts honed. Victor had come to rely on her not just as a wife, but as an ally in navigating the dangerous web that surrounded him. Their relationship, once strictly formal and distant, had begun to shift in subtle, unspoken ways. He noticed the way she anticipated threats, the precision in her movements, and the strength behind her calm voice. Ariana, in turn, began to see glimpses of the man beneath the cold exterior, the man capable of deep strategy, rare empathy, and a protective intensity that unsettled and intrigued her in equal measure. It started with a simple dinner in the mansion's vast dining hall. Victor's staff had been instructed to maintain heightened security, yet the atmosphere was quiet, almost peaceful. Ariana, dressed in a sleek black gown described in careful detail by Evelyn, moved through the room confidently, listening to the soft murmurs of the staff and the distant hum of the city outside. Victor, sitting at the head of the table, studied her as she took her seat beside him. "You are ready for what's coming," he said softly, not as a statement, but as an acknowledgement of her growth. Ariana met his gaze calmly. "I've never been more ready," she replied, a faint smile brushing her lips. "I trust my instincts, and now I trust yours." But the peace was fleeting. A message arrived, subtle yet unmistakably menacing. "All your moves are being watched. The girl is not as safe as you think." Ariana unfolded it with practiced fingers, immediately recognizing the calculated threat behind the simple words. Victor's jaw tightened as he read it over her shoulder. "Julian Cross is escalating," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Ariana felt no fear, only determination. "Then we escalate too," she responded. "We've prepared for this. Let them come." That night, Victor summoned a select few allies, men and women of influence who operated in the shadows of his empire. Ariana listened intently as plans were laid, details discussed, and contingencies mapped. Her role was no longer passive, she provided insight based on her unique perspective, anticipating threats and offering strategies Victor had not considered. The room, filled with power and secrecy, buzzed with quiet tension. For the first time, Ariana felt fully integrated into this world, not as a pawn, but as a partner. Yet danger was never far behind. Weeks later, during a high-profile gala hosted by Victor, Ariana felt the subtle shift in energy immediately. The crowd was composed of wealthy and influential figures, yet she could sense the presence of someone unfamiliar, someone dangerous. Her heart rate increased, but her mind remained sharp. Guided by Victor's subtle nods and her own instincts, she moved through the crowd with precision, listening for the faintest signs of threat. Then she heard it, a whisper behind her ear, soft yet chilling, "You should not have come." Ariana spun slightly, her senses alert. No visible figure, only shadows. She recognized the signature of Julian Cross. Victor appeared at her side instantly. "Stay close," he murmured. Ariana complied, yet she was no longer merely dependent. She had learned to read movement, tone, and intent with unnerving accuracy. Together, they navigated the gala, confronting threats with subtle maneuvers and unspoken coordination. By the end of the night, the danger had been neutralized quietly, without anyone outside the mansion or the immediate circle realizing the storm that had passed through. Back at the mansion, Ariana confronted Victor privately. "He is relentless," she said, her voice calm but firm. "He will not stop until he destroys you or me." Victor remained silent for a moment, then spoke with a rare softness. "And yet, you are still here. Stronger than I ever imagined. You've changed everything." Ariana met his gaze steadily. "We've changed everything," she corrected. The words carried weight, binding them together not just as husband and wife, but as partners facing a world determined to break them. The next challenge arrived unexpectedly. Helena intercepted a report that Julian Cross had formed an alliance with one of Victor's trusted associates, a betrayal that cut deeper than any physical threat. Ariana, Victor, and Helena convened in the study, plotting a strategy to uncover the traitor and protect the mansion. Ariana's mind worked swiftly, analyzing patterns of behavior, the timing of communications, and subtle inconsistencies in routines. Victor, observing her skill, realized that her value went beyond instinct and training. She had become a strategist in her own right. When the confrontation finally occurred, Ariana led the exchange with confidence. The traitor had expected intimidation, perhaps even deception, but what they encountered was precision and calculated authority. Ariana anticipated each lie, each evasive maneuver, and dismantled the threat with clarity and control. Victor watched, amazed and quietly proud, as the woman he had once thought of as fragile turned betrayal into triumph. In that moment, he recognized the full scope of her transformation. She was no longer the blind girl sold into marriage, she was a force that could rival anyone in his world. Afterward, the mansion was quieter than usual, but the tension lingered. Ariana sat alone in the garden, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the city. She reflected on the path that had brought her here: betrayal, danger, training, and triumph. Each challenge had shaped her, hardening her resolve and sharpening her mind. She realized that survival was no longer enough. She wanted control, influence, and a place in a world that had once sought to use her as a pawn. Victor joined her, his presence strong and unassuming. "You've changed me," he said quietly, the words uncharacteristically personal. Ariana turned toward him. "And you've changed me," she replied. "We've both survived the impossible. Now, we define what comes next." Their hands brushed briefly, a subtle acknowledgement of connection, trust, and unspoken understanding. The mansion, vast and imposing, had become a symbol not of confinement, but of power, a fortress of strategy, loyalty, and resilience. But as night fell, Ariana knew that the greatest challenges were still ahead. Julian Cross would not rest, and his ambition was only matched by his cunning. The enemies surrounding Victor were resourceful and ruthless. Ariana and Victor had survived storms before, but the coming battles required more than strength. They required vision, courage, and the unbreakable bond that had begun to form between them. And Ariana, the blind girl who had been sold into a cold billionaire's hands, was no longer waiting to see what would happen. She was ready to act, to strike, and to shape her own destiny. The garden fell silent, except for the soft whisper of wind through the trees. Ariana closed her eyes, feeling the world in its rawest form. Danger, betrayal, strategy, and courage, all intertwined in the mansion's shadowed walls. And in the quiet darkness, she made a promise: "I will not be anyone's weakness. I will protect those I care for, and I will claim my place in this world, no matter the cost." Victor, standing just behind her, sensed the promise, the determination, and the storm that was far from over. Together, they were unstoppable, and their enemies had yet to realize it. The tension that had been building for months reached its peak in the heart of the Blackwood mansion. Ariana moved through the rooms with calculated precision, each step guided by memory, instinct, and a heightened awareness of every sound and shift in the air. She had become more than Victor's wife, she was his partner, his equal, and in many ways, his shield. Julian Cross and his network of enemies had grown bolder, but Ariana's transformation into a strategist and warrior had turned the tables in ways no one, not even Victor, could have foreseen. That morning began quietly, deceptively so. Ariana was in the library, reviewing security measures with Helena, when a subtle vibration through the floor caught her attention. It was faint, but deliberate. "Someone is moving through the east wing," she whispered, her voice low. Helena nodded, signaling the staff to respond. Ariana felt Victor's presence behind her before he spoke. "I'll handle the perimeter," he said, the edge of controlled anger clear in his tone. Ariana's hand brushed his briefly, a subtle signal that she was ready to act. The mansion, for all its luxury and grandeur, had become their battlefield, each hallway and room a carefully mapped arena. As the hours passed, the intruders made their move. Multiple men, trained and confident, attempted to infiltrate the mansion, relying on the assumption that Ariana's blindness made her a weakness. They were about to learn the opposite. Using her acute hearing, heightened reflexes, and intimate knowledge of the mansion, Ariana intercepted them one by one. She moved like a phantom, striking with precision, disarming and incapacitating without hesitation. Victor moved in tandem with her, their unspoken coordination flawless. Each encounter was a test, and each time Ariana emerged stronger, faster, more aware. By evening, they had cornered the main threat, Julian Cross himself. He stepped into the main hall, a smug smile on his face, underestimating the blind girl he had sought to intimidate. Ariana sensed him before he even spoke, adjusting her stance, her body tense, ready. Victor remained a silent sentinel beside her, his eyes watching every micro-expression, every shift in energy. Julian lunged, confident and aggressive, expecting to overpower them. But Ariana anticipated his movements, using her weight and timing to redirect his attacks, her cane and fists precise instruments of defense. Victor struck with calculated force, ensuring that the intruder could not escape, while Ariana's instincts neutralized the subtle threats that accompanied him. When Julian fell, defeated and restrained, Ariana approached him slowly. Her voice was calm, unwavering. "You underestimated me. You underestimated him. And you underestimated what we've become together." Julian's smirk faltered as the weight of her words sank in. Victor's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, not to protect, but to acknowledge the victory she had claimed. Together, they had turned fear into strength, vulnerability into power. The aftermath was profound. Victor reinforced the mansion's security, ensuring that such an infiltration could never occur again. He shared with Ariana the full extent of the enemy's plans, their motives, and the networks they had tried to exploit. Ariana absorbed it all, not as a passive listener, but as a strategist ready to act. She suggested countermeasures, improvements, and strategies that surprised even Victor. He realized fully, perhaps for the first time, that she was not just a survivor, she was a leader in her own right. In the quiet that followed the storm, Ariana and Victor stood together in the garden. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and earth. She could hear the distant hum of the city, the soft rustle of leaves, and the quiet strength of the mansion behind them. Victor spoke softly, a rare moment of vulnerability. "I never expected this, not you, not us. I thought this marriage was a transaction, a convenience." Ariana turned toward him, sensing the depth of his emotion in the way he shifted, the quiet strength in his tone. "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "I realize it was never about convenience. It was about survival. And not just my survival, you've changed that. You've changed me. We've changed everything." Ariana's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and something deeper, something unspoken but profoundly real. They had survived betrayal, threats, and danger, and in the process, they had forged a bond stronger than either had anticipated. The following weeks solidified their partnership. Ariana took an active role in Victor's empire, her strategies and insights becoming invaluable. She traveled with him, met with allies and adversaries, and navigated high-stakes negotiations with a confidence that stunned everyone who underestimated her. Victor remained by her side, not as a protector in the traditional sense, but as a partner and equal, his respect for her growing each day. Even their personal relationship deepened. The cold distance that had defined their marriage melted into mutual understanding and quiet intimacy. They shared moments of laughter, subtle touches, and unspoken acknowledgement of the journey they had endured together. Ariana, once a blind girl sold into marriage, had become a woman who controlled her destiny, shaped her world, and claimed her place beside a man who had once been untouchable. Yet, as they both knew, vigilance was never optional in their world. Julian Cross and his allies were weakened, but not destroyed. New threats would emerge, alliances would shift, and challenges would continue to test them. But Ariana no longer faced these dangers as a helpless victim. She had trained, adapted, and grown into a force that no one could ignore. Her blindness, once perceived as a weakness, had become her greatest strength, allowing her to sense, anticipate, and conquer in ways others could not. The mansion, a symbol of wealth and power, now stood as a testament to resilience, strategy, and courage. Ariana walked its halls with quiet authority, Victor's presence beside her a constant reminder that their partnership was unbreakable. Together, they had faced the impossible, overcome betrayal, and neutralized threats that would have destroyed lesser people. And through it all, Ariana had discovered the depth of her own strength, a strength that could never be taken from her. On a calm, clear night, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the lights twinkling like stars below. Ariana rested her hand on Victor's, feeling the warmth and steady strength of the man who had once seemed cold and distant. "We've survived the storm," she said quietly. Victor nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And we will survive whatever comes next. Together." Ariana smiled, her heart steady, her mind clear, and her spirit unshakable. The blind girl who had been sold into a cold billionaire's hands had not only survived, she had triumphed. And now, nothing in the world could stop her. In the distance, the city continued its rhythm, unaware that within the walls of the Blackwood mansion, two people had reshaped their destinies. Love, respect, power, and resilience intertwined, forming an unbreakable bond. And as Ariana and Victor stood together, facing whatever the future might bring, one truth was clear: she was no longer a victim, no longer a pawn, no longer someone to be underestimated. She was a force. She was a partner. She was the storm that no one could contain. The mansion fell silent, the night deep and peaceful for the first time in months. But Ariana knew this peace was only temporary. Challenges would arise, enemies would return, and the world would test them again. Yet she welcomed it. For she was ready. She was prepared. And most importantly, she was no longer blind, not to the world, not to herself, and certainly not to the power she had discovered within. And so, in the quiet aftermath of victory, Ariana finally allowed herself to smile, knowing that the blind girl who had once been sold was now unstoppable. The story that had begun in darkness had ended in strength, partnership, and triumph, proof that even in the harshest circumstances, courage and resilience could transform a life forever.